Good morning, good afternoon, that is, family engagement leaders of Ohio. We are here on, at least in Columbus, a sunny Tuesday, January 21st. And I want to welcome you to our first meeting in a while. I hope everyone's holiday times as well as New Year brought them rejuvenation and excitement and hopefully some time with family and friends. So we're happy to see you all today. I know people are going to be trickling in over the next couple minutes or so, but definitely don't want to get behind in the agenda because we have some great presenters today, and we're going to be covering some topics that you all have asked for via some of the communication we've had going back and forth. So happy to have you all here today. I just want to set some ground rules or considerations as before we get too far. I just want to let you know I believe that the sign just flashed up on your screen. This meeting is being recorded, and we will share those recordings out with you as quickly as we can. Other things to consider, feel free to chime in anytime in the chat box. We love if you are able to ask a question through your computer or headset. But if you want to drop anything in the chat box anytime, we will be monitoring that. Accordingly, with kind of that setup, all the lines are muted right now. So if you've unmuted yourself and you find yourself to be muted in a couple minutes or so, once you've finished your question or wrapped up your thoughts, that is just to reduce echo and feedback. um, Encourage you to use your webcams, especially when we are doing any type of discussion. So appreciate those of you who are already there with us. Last thing, the PowerPoint and agenda for this meeting are both online at currently at our fellows webpage. On that same webpage, you'll find all the recordings of this meeting is there too, hopefully tomorrow, but definitely by the next day. Um, Special point just for presenters. I will be controlling the PowerPoint while you're presenting, just so that we don't have to do a whole switcheroo every time someone changes. So if you could remember to give me a sign or message when you need your PowerPoint advance, that'd be helpful. So just something else to be aware of there. So, as I said, we got jam-packed agenda. So as people continue to roll in here, I want to run over this really quick, make sure everyone's good with it. So we're going to do a couple of updates and set the agenda for the group really quick. And then we're going to have three presentations. One will be from our friends here at the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center, and then two from active fellows themselves. We'll have a presentation on measurement by Dr. Amanda Klein, and then deeper dive into what this looks like in practice by Tracy Hill from Cleveland Metropolitan School District. So we're excited to not only be able to provide you guys with some of the um, topics that you'd like to see addressed from some of your survey results and feedback, but also make sure that we are highlighting the work of some of our colleagues here in this group. So it's a very exciting meeting for me. And at the end, we'll have some time just to debrief. I will throw out a potential date for the next virtual meeting. And then if you wouldn't mind doing a little exit survey for us so we can always improve, and then we'll adjourn. So if you have any objections to this agenda, feel free to share them now, or additions, things like that. Shoot that in the chat box and we'll try to make adjustments as necessary. So I did want to make sure to just stop, take a deep breath, and welcome you all to our community here. The Family Engagement Leaders of Ohio is really about building a community of district professionals throughout the state and the colleagues that support them to do the best work they can to create family and community and school partnerships to advance student learning. So I appreciate all of you who came back for a second meeting. I do know that we have a good group of new practitioners too joining us, so a lot of expertise in this room that we're excited to share and learn about. Um, so if at this point, just as we get started, if you wouldn't mind sharing your name, position, and organization in the chat box. And while you're there, if you wouldn't mind, putting a note or two about what brings you here today, just so we all can be on the same page, that'd be helpful. And as we see those rolling in, we already see that people are situated in all different kind of types of positions here, but we're all coming together with one kind of goal and objective. So just an exciting group of people to be around with so much expertise. Continue to make sure you drop that in there if you're able to do so. And while we are doing that, I'm gonna think about uh, another question. I've been sending out kind of almost weekly um, updates for our discussion board and as well as things happening throughout the fellow community. And I'm just gonna drop a little poll right here about two things that we've talked about. Number one, have these update emails been useful? Is it just filling up your inbox? If there are things that you need out of these emails or would like to see out of them, feel free to drop that in the comment. And then the other thing is I've been putting together a contact list. There's been it's going to be an opt-in only thing, right? So there's been a limited amount of interaction with the survey to make sure that gets up there. So I'm seeing that a lot of people still find that to be useful. So if you see that in the email updates or even today, just think about it. Make sure to take that survey, get your name on the list, and all that published as soon as we can. Just have a network of people to talk to about this work in a professional manner is always a good thing to have. So I'll give a couple more seconds, drop your name in there, look at these poll questions, and then we're going to move on to some big news here. So as you continue to vote and catch up with your colleagues there, I wanted to share some big news. We have confirmed a date and place for a Family Engagement Leaders of Ohio Summit. Um, as we continue to have these quarterly virtual meetings and have some time and space in our message board and other activities to catch up in the in-between, we thought it would, not only did we think, but we also heard that it might be good to have a in-person institute where we could really take a day to expand our learning and make sure that our needs as professionals in family engagement are being fulfilled. So this date will be September 17th, 2020, and that's about as much details as we have right now. It will be in on the north side of Columbus for that day. So make sure you mark your calendars and share with your colleagues that might be interested about this. We will definitely be seeking feedback and input around what kind of the day looks like, what type of learning activities would be most welcome and useful for you all. Really want this to be a day of learning and practice for us as family engagement professionals, as opposed to kind of being tagged on to another part of another conference. Make sure that we have our kind of own track for professional learning and collaboration together. So this is very exciting for us, and I hope it's exciting for you all as we grow this community and grow in our learning together. If there are topics or specific speakers that you wish to see or have played out here, I know we've collected a lot of topics from you in the past, so we have a decent sense of that. But if speakers or types of learning that you think would suit the next steps of your plan to have excellent family school community partnerships in your school and district, feel free to drop those in the chat box as well. If things come to you over time, also always here. Um, Feel free to drop me an email or phone call anytime. Without a lot further fanfare or ado, if you will, we're going to move into kind of the learning portion of our day. And the way that this is going to work is we'll have 3 presentations kind of back to back to back, and I hope that you find that they kind of build on each other and kind of take from the really the idea around measurement and family engagement and kind of things that we want to think about as we're planning this out, all the way to what it looks like in practice in a school district. So hopefully, wherever you are on the continuum of this work, that you find some new ideas and something valuable to take back today. Um, at any time, if you feel free to share questions in the chat box, we'll be sure to be monitoring that for all of the presenters. And yes, we will get going straight into that. So first, I would love to take a moment to introduce Dr. Barbara Boone and Dr. Meredith Wellman, both of the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center. And we heard a little bit about their background last time we met. So today, they will be presenting on goal-linked measurement in family engagement. And I am excited to turn it over to them for all of your learning needs.
Thanks, Tom. We are so excited about that summit and are really hoping that everyone can make it and we have a chance to meet all of you in person. I'm Barbara Boone, and I'm going to kick off this time that Meredith and I are going to share. She'll be jumping in just a little bit. I'm going to kind of start us off with just some general thinking that we would like to share with you around measuring family engagement. And Tom, you can shift to the next slide for us. Then Meredith is going to jump in and share with you some of the lessons learned that we have from working with districts over the years in conducting these larger scale sort of surveys, or trying to get the perceptions of many families, whether school-wide or district-wide together. And we'd like to share those lessons learned with you, and then share with you some tools that are available on our website that we'd like to point you to that you might find useful. So Tom, if you'll go ahead and shift to our next slide. Here's my first question for you to kick this off. Why do we measure our work? Why do you measure your work? Why do others measure their work around family engagement, family and community engagement in education? Let's use a chat box for this. I'm not going to pop up a poll for this, but if you would jump on the chat box, you can one-word answers, sentence answers. You can answer more than once as well. And I'll throw one out there. Well, because we have to, for compliance, right? We have a grant, we have federal funding or a grant or something that says you must ask families what they think. So sometimes we do it because we have to. So I see a what gets measured gets done. I'm glad you brought that up. We had actually had a slide that earlier that said that we were trying to narrow things down a little bit and we took it out, but there is this attention that when something's going to get measured, it gets done. You know, we've all been students who probably in the past, I know I said, you know, is this going to be on the test? I mean, that was what I studied. That was what I boned up on, right? Were those things that were going to be tested. Progress monitoring is a great point. Thanks for sharing that. Like, how are we doing? How are we keeping track of how are we implementing things? We put a plan in place, but we don't want to wait till the very end. We want to see how we're doing in implementing that to find out what's working and what's not. That's another thing, a great example there of you know, when something's not working and then being able to ask those questions of, well, why is it not working? Are we not doing enough of it? Are we doing it at the wrong time? Are we doing it in the wrong way? Are we doing it in a way that the folks that we're trying to reach are not able to engage with us? Fidelity and outcomes. Those are another great comment there. Are we doing the work with fidelity? So we know a lot about how to engage with families well. And that measure of how many of those components of really high quality and high impact family engagement do we have embedded in the work that we're doing and those outcomes, right? And I'm glad you brought that up. I think from all of us, from Tracy Hill and the examples from Cleveland and Amanda Klein, we're going to hear about that sort of outcomes-based evaluation. So I thank you for that. You know, compliance, we're supposed to use data. We know we're supposed to use data. We are good soldiers. We collect data and then what? Right? It's always that, so now we have it, so what are we going to do with it? Most importantly, and I think you brought this up, it's to improve, to know that we are continuously improving, to really understand deeply the work that we're doing, whether it's leading to outcomes, whether we're doing it with fidelity, to monitor, to prove and demonstrate that what we're doing is effective or not, and to be able to change that. I think something that we didn't quite bring up yet, but I think you would probably agree with is this work, we should be celebrating the work that we do. So much of what we do with our partners, with our families, and acknowledging and celebrating the successes we have and those impacts. I know if you're like us, you know, we can always be on to the next thing, but it's important for us to take the time to look back at our data and see where we can move forward. So, and depending on your goal, you may pick different ways or different reasons for measuring. Tom, if you would flip slides. So we think this is a great quote we like to share with folks from Joyce Epstein and her colleague Steve Sheldon, who said research indicates that when school planning teams evaluate their school's family engagement efforts, the outcome is more equitable. It's more equitable outreach to all families, and more engagement activities are linked to student success. You know, in the National Network of Partnership Schools model, there are teams, there's lots of planning, there's lots of things that happen. But what's interesting in the component of all of that planning and teams meeting and in implementing those teams, what's really key to increasing the outreach and the equitable outreach to families is the evaluation step. It's that step of looking at who are we reaching, what are those outcomes, and also looking in the gaps, looking for where in that space we aren't seeing outcomes, or who are we not connecting with in a meaningful way. So we also want to recognize this idea that family engagement and measurement helps us to reach this goal of really creating opportunity for all students and for all families to engage. When we talk about looking in the gaps, we're talking about really intentionally looking for families with whom we are not partnering well yet, and to look for how do we build those connections with them. Tom, you can go ahead and shift. So this idea, you know, one of the things we want to push past, and I'm sure you've heard this from many speakers before, but it's getting past the head count. And yet, even though we really know this, we know that oftentimes we are still measuring success by how many people attend an event. And yet we know that no matter how many people are in this webinar today, that's not really an indicator of the quality of what's going to be said or what we're going to learn here, right? It's not how many of us are necessarily here, but we want to get past that and get deeper. So goal-linked family engagement can be measured by looking at the impacts of family engagement strategies for families, teachers, and students, just like someone earlier said, the outcomes and fidelity. Thanks, Tom. You can go ahead and shift. So when we are measuring goal-linked family engagement activities, it could look like this. I just wanted to put some concrete examples around it. It could look like family members reporting that they learned a new skill for helping their child with spelling. So rather than counting how many parents came to that literacy night where we talked about tips for helping your child with spelling, how many people report that they learned a new skill? Family members providing regular feedback on a new attendance program. So how many families are providing that feedback? Family members perhaps using a journal to provide insights to their child's teacher about the implementation of a behavioral intervention. So say the family and teachers plan something together to help support a child's behavior, and we are talking back and forth with one another. Families report using tools provided by the school. Not that we just provided them and shared them, but families are reporting back to us that they're using these. The families report having, say, family meals or talking with their children about topics related to learning at home. Or another example of a goal-linked measurement, maybe Tom, one more. Oh, let's talk about on the teacher side of this. No, we're ready to. So teachers, perhaps their fidelity of implementation of sending home a positive communication each month, right? So we put something like that into place, and then we're teachers reporting on the fidelity of implementation, or teachers incorporating listening practices into their parent-teacher conferences so that they are not only speaking to families, but they're also hearing, and we've got that sort of two-way communication happening in parent-teacher conferences. Or if we measure teachers' efficacy for learning about families and connecting to their families' funds of knowledge, or those curriculum, of the home, those things that at home that we can connect to the learning in the classroom to make it more relevant for our kiddos. The next one, Tom. So why do district surveys? So we have this idea of this, that goal-linked family engagement measures are going to really get at the outcomes, the fidelity, the measures of success connected to actions that we do, right? Strategies that we use. So now we're going to kind of dig into why do we do sort of a district level survey, because it may seem sort of too high level to, it may seem like, well, gee, that's sort of a different level. It's not as close to the implementation or to the ground. So we're going to start this off though with a poll. I believe we have a poll. Oh no, actually, let me talk for just a minute, and I think Meredith's going to kick our poll in here. So let me just share these points with you. That being a district that listens and acts on the input and experiences of families. So that's why we encourage districts or even schools to do sort of a larger scale data collection from families, right? We want to be families that listen, or districts that listen and act on the input and experiences of families. And in order to get that sort of pulse, oftentimes it's using that sort of broad survey. District-wide data and building level comparisons, seeing how are we doing across the data, and do we have an equitable experiences of families from building to building? What does that look like? Using that information we have to inform improvements and changes. So we might be able to, as we do a district, to take a look at our students' sort of primary experiences, our middle school experience. We might be able to see that, boy, at the shift from 5th to 6th grade, we see a real change in families' perceptions. So it gives us a place to really target our actions at the district level, and then identify and direct programming towards those specific needs. Helps us to inform district level policies, and check for awareness of resources as well in general. I know so many districts have great resources for families, but oftentimes awareness of these resources is not always there. Also understanding from families how their experience varies and shifts. It may experience from one building to another. 2 elementary buildings, families may have very different experiences, or how their experience shifts as their child moves through the grade levels in our district. And really, as we look at that to see, do we have issues where families that are in some grade levels, in some school buildings, are not having those same high quality partnership experiences that we want them to have. So now I'm going to hand it over to Meredith, and Meredith is going to kick it off with a poll.
Hi, everybody. So if you could respond to our poll, we want to know before I start talking about getting a high rate of return, does your district currently survey all families at least once a year? So there's about probably 20 people that are not presenting on the webinar right now. So I'll just wait until we have a few responses at least. Looks like 7 of you so far, or 8 of you so far are saying yes, so that's awesome. So hopefully the remainder of this particular presentation today will help you think maybe a bit differently about getting a high rate of return. And 4 people are unsure, so a good question to take back to somebody else at your district and say, how often are families being surveyed? In what sort of programs are they being surveyed? Maybe you have 21st century funding and there's a some sort of requirement there to do a survey of all families each year. So there's a variety of reasons and programs that embed surveys for families, but you might need to hunt around to see what's being surveyed. All right. In that poll, thank you for your responses. Okay. So and it sounds like many of you do, if you do a family survey, how can you ensure that you'll get a high rate of return, or at least do everything you can to, on the district side, to ensure that people have access to complete the survey? The first thing to consider, Tom, you can advance the slide, is why do we need a high rate of return? Well, we know that when we get more surveys back, a higher percentage of families in the district, then we have more actionable data. So sometimes you might set a goal, like I want 60% of families to participate in my district. Setting a goal can be really, really helpful in thinking about what it will take to get to that goal. So if you know from experience that most of the times you send out things to families, you only get about a 20% response, no matter what it is, then you may have to set up some new policies or incentives or processes to really get to a higher goal. I think when we've worked with districts to do surveys in the past, we've let them know that if the school building participating has less than, say, 30%, it's not really meaningful to give them the data back necessarily, because you're not really getting a representative sample of the school. And sometimes when I talk about this topic, people ask me, well, what can we expect in terms of a response rate? We've seen as high as nearly 100%, and sometimes the data looks like more than 100% because we get multiple caregivers per child responding. And other times we've seen less than 10% response rate and really have not been able to give back actionable data. So it really depends on a lot of things that we'll talk about here soon. So if you already do a survey, maybe you could type into the chat box what kinds of response rates you've gotten either at the building or the district level. That would be interesting just to see what people's experiences have been if you're aware of that number. And then ask yourself, what's our target this year? What seems realistic? Because you don't want to necessarily set unrealistic targets from year to year, but if you have some prior year's data on your response rates, then you can kind of say, okay, staff, okay, district, like we really want to, establish this as a routine thing that we do every year. So each year we want to increase our response rate. We're going to try new and different things to get there. All right, so it looks like based on what people are saying, there is sort of a wide variety of response rates, but from families, 10 to 20%, 12%, so not always great. So, so good, that's why you're here, hopefully to learn some new things. Hopefully we can be helpful, and continuing to learn from your experiences will be helpful. So sharing with us throughout the presentation, if we're recommending things that you haven't found helpful, or if you have other strategies that we're not recommending, please type them into the chat box or reach out to us afterward. Okay, so I'm curious from you all, the types of messages that you send to parents. We found a couple things to be important in doing district surveys in Ohio. So communicating a message to parents and caregivers that their ideas are important and anonymous. So sometimes the way we collect data makes it not so anonymous. So making sure to, not require a name or a student's name at the top of the survey. Also letting parents and caregivers know that you value their perspective, that they're helping you do a better job of partnering with them and supporting their child's learning by responding to this survey. Another message to parents and caregivers is that as a district, you want to have more welcoming schools and increase the true, the shared goal of academic success of students and high graduation rates. So in order to do your job better as a district, you have to let families know sort of why you're collecting this data. So maybe the goal, and maybe you could tailor this to the particular survey you're doing. So maybe you want to improve a program or a set of programs, or you want to improve the transition into your school building or the transition to the next school building. So you may have targeted messages. Those are good too. But if you're doing sort of a general survey of parents and caregivers' perceptions of your district, maybe that message could be you want it to be more welcoming. You want to communicate that the survey is convenient, and make sure that it is. If there's only really one way to access the survey, it may not be convenient for families, but trying to communicate that it's brief, convenient, those things can increase your response rate. And what else do we say to families? This is a chance for them to tell us what they think. So really to communicate that you want to learn is important. And then I know personally, I'm much more likely to respond to something if I know it's going to be used for something in particular. So if you could communicate that you are going to use this to develop staff training on family engagement, that may be a motivator for people to respond. And there are many other improvements that could come out of it that you could communicate to families. All right, Tom, next slide. Okay, and how do you communicate with teachers about the importance of surveying families? You want to make sure that teachers know the purpose of the survey and what it measures, that it's not a teacher evaluation, how you as a district are going to use the information that you're gathering so that they can really have sort of an elevator pitch for families. If families ask, what is this? Why should I do it? So they kind of know, oh, this is really important for me as a teacher, for our grade, for our school, to improve the way we communicate or offer these programs or listen to you as families. So those specific communications, giving teachers the tools to really communicate well with families about the survey is important. Another super important thing to communicate with teachers is the district's goal for their school or classroom's response. And get ideas from the teachers about how to increase families' awareness of the survey. So maybe they do specific things in their classroom to get families engaged. And so if those things are working well, don't limit the ways that they share about this survey. Give them maybe a sample message they can put on Class Dojo, or a link for their homework website, or whatever they use normally to communicate with families. So kind of give them the tools from the district to that classroom level. Let's see, what else we have here? There's a lot of ways that you can communicate with teachers about getting a high response rate. So how could students be involved? Sometimes in the districts that we've seen that have had high response rates, we've seen that their most successful schools have been the ones that sort of sent home a paper copy in a student's folder. So I know it's sometimes harder to do that in the older grade levels, but I think that high schools and middle schools could still make that work. So that's sort of a way, and each teacher kind of knew their role in getting the surveys back and knew their goal for their classroom. And then sometimes students are our best allies in this work. So having them feel like there's motivation to get these surveys back. So whether that's offering a jeans day for students, or we've had schools do a dance, like offer a dance for the grade that had the biggest response rate. So lots of ways to be creative about this. Okay, so what have we seen has been promising practice? I've talked about a couple as I went, but maybe the biggest thing that we've seen is the importance of principal leadership. So if principals are getting out there and messaging directly to families, if they're messaging with their staff about their goals for this and the importance of it, then that's hugely important. If they're sitting down with the team that's doing this, distributing the survey and collating it and entering the data, then it's going to be a higher priority for their staff. I've talked a little bit about sort of setting goals, but what this looks like when you do it at the district level is you need a way to sort of track how things are going. So if you have a month-long window to complete a survey, And I'm curious how long people keep their surveys open and sort of methods for delivery. So if anything you want to share in the chat would be great. But so what we've done with districts in the past is we've sort of had a table set up in the beginning with sort of each grade level. And I think, Tom, if you go forward through this, here are some other ideas. So announce each school day, phone and text reminders, different ways of communicating about the survey and completing it. But if you go to the next slide, I believe there's a sample table. So this is just an example from a district in Ohio. So they had an elementary school, 2 middle schools, and a high school. And so they set up a table where they said, okay, here's the total enrollment of students at each of these grade, in each of these buildings. So our goal at a minimum is to get 60% of the building's families to complete the survey. So on a weekly basis, then they got data on how many people had completed it electronically for those buildings and how many had completed it via paper. And so then they were able to say to specific schools, you know, your numbers are really high, good job, keep up the good work, you can do this, you can get to your goal, or, you know, oh my gosh, we've gotten like no data from your school, what's going on, how can we help, what events are coming up that we could really broadcast about the survey at. So sometimes there's parent-teacher conferences coming up, and then you can kind of just fold it into that and say, while families are in the building, or let's go ahead and send out letters to the grade levels that aren't having a high response rate. Lots of different ideas. Okay, so hopefully you got some new ideas from that about your district level surveys of families. Barb is going to jump back on here now and talk about other measurement tools from our website that you can look into.
Great.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Meredith. Hey, Tom, would you go ahead and flip to the next slide? And I don't want to use up any more time than I need to here, but just to let you know that on our website, ohiofamiliesengage.osu.edu, that's what we're referring to now when we say this is where you can find these things. There's on the far right, in this picture it's on the left, but in the far right is a search, and you can type a keyword in there and it'll bring these things up easily for you. So Tom, if you'll flip to the next slide, just a few things we want to share with you. One of them is we have a sort of a list of surveys and checklists that we have looked at and tried to create a summary here of what the name of it is, who you administer it to, a basic description of it, where you can find it, and if there's a certain page number you need to look for in that document. So this is one thing that we have available that's just a list of sort of many surveys that you might want to consider that adapting or using in your school or district. Tom, if you'll flip to the next slide. Another thing is we've developed 3 rubrics for family engagement in PBIS, or utilizing PBIS. And each of these rubrics is a self-assessment tool for a PBIS school team to measure their level of engagement of families in this process of implementing PBIS. So depending on if they're focusing on Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3, or all 3, there are different rubrics for each of those. So that's another tight measurement tool for family engagement within PBIS. Tom, if you'll flip to the next one. Another one is a family engagement in early literacy rubric. It's similar to the PBIS rubrics, but here's a sample picture a slide where the school sort of self-assesses what level are we? Are we level 1, 2, 3, or 4? Where do we sort of fall? And how could we improve on this? And there's some planning questions in this document as well. So this one is geared for family engagement in early literacy, and it's a self-assessment rubric. There are other tools. There is a family engagement assessment scale that you measure both school staff and families using similar items, and then you can kind of compare staff perceptions to family perceptions. It's another one that's also available on our website. And another one that's not on our website yet, but that we are piloting with some school districts around the state, is an inventory, another self-assessment tool for schools that focuses on family engagement and early literacy, and it's a sort of an inventory of practices for schools. So those are a few different measurement type tools that are available. And of course, we are working with Johns Hopkins and the National Network of Partnership Schools to implement the the National Network of Partnership Schools model in several districts across the state of Ohio, and they also have many different surveys and instruments that you can see at their products and their tools at Johns Hopkins. So I think that wraps up Meredith and my time, and I want to appreciate all of you for listening and want to hand this back to Tom now. And if we can be a resource to you, please reach out to us.
Thank you all for your contributions today. That was really great to hear about kind of the tools available and some of the thinking that should go into tool selection and planning around this. I encourage you all to jump on the website if you get a chance, if you're examining how either how you're surveying families or teachers or students, or if you just want some more ideas about how to improve your survey, jump on there. Like I said, we just heard about some of the tools, some of the thinking around selecting tools, and some of the thinking that goes into planning. Let's take a moment to hear from Dr. Amanda Klein of Structured Solutions LLC, and also a fellow member who's been with us from the beginning here about kind of how to get the ball rolling with some of these things. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Klein now.
Thank you so much, Tom, and it's an honor to present. Tom and Dr. Boone were among my first contacts when I moved to Ohio, which is almost 2 years ago at this point. So it's been very cool to see everyone kind of end up working together and be able to join and be part of this network. I appreciate the opportunity to present today, and I'm going to tell you a bit about my experiences as not only an educator myself, but also throughout my consulting work, which has been to help schools and districts use measurement in the area of family engagement, particularly because we know it doesn't always get measured. Tom, you can go to the next slide. So just a few things about me. I love using data to tell stories and highlight trends and, uncover new pieces of information. And let me be very clear, I am not a statistician, and I don't expect anyone I work with to be. A lot of this can be done in very simple ways, but strategic ways at the same time. We'll be talking about some of that. I moved to Columbus from Baltimore, Maryland, where I spent most of my career in practice as a teacher, as a community resource coordinator, or at least that I think is the title they use in Ohio. It's a little different there. I worked for Baltimore City Public Schools as a district family engagement specialist and then as their evaluator. As I mentioned, I have my own consulting company. I've had it since 2015. I also teach on the side at Stevenson University in Maryland in their community-based education and leadership program. And most recently, actually just joined OSU doing some part-time research with this College of Social Work on vulnerable youth and families. So I do a lot of different things, but they're all around the same topics. Yeah, so we can go through this kind of quickly, Tom, if you want to just show the whole slide, because Dr. Boone and Dr. Wellman kind of touched on this. Someone shared this exact quote with me a number of years ago, and I think I've used it in about 90% of the presentations I've given since, because it just, I think, conveys the point brilliantly. Not only what gets measured gets done, and I think that's true, but there is like deeper meaning to that too. We can't learn from our successes and failures if we don't know what they are. And at the last one here, if you can demonstrate results, you get to keep doing what you're doing. And so I know Dr. Boone mentioned compliance, and we'll definitely talk about that. But this is kind of the flip side of the compliance piece, right? Like if you can really show all that you're doing, then you get opportunities to continue and grow that work. So I've always loved this particular quote as a way to just really highlight why it's more than just something we have to do. But those pressures are still very real. Go ahead. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the measurement challenges that I've personally faced. Now, full disclaimer, you probably know by now, I really love data. So my challenges may be different from some people's challenges who really despise data or are afraid of data, and those are very valid feelings. But here are some of the things that I've experienced. Sometimes I felt like I was the only one who cared about data. Like no one else really wanted to give it any time. Certainly, as we talked about, the pressure that comes from compliance around needing to do better. Sometimes it was difficult when my colleagues may have had an interest in trying to improve, but didn't have any training or background in understanding and using data. And so we had to kind of start from square one, and I had to do trainings with colleagues, or sometimes there wasn't time to do that. Speaking of which, there's always people in your organizations, and sometimes it's ourselves, who just are so overwhelmed with other work that data does not become a priority. And then kind of just a lack of structure around using data in an organization. No uniform tools for collecting data, no systems in place for how we discuss it in meetings. Those types of things have been really challenging in trying to incorporate data into our regular work. So I would love for you to take a couple seconds, if you can go back for 1 second, Tom. I would love for you to just, in the chat box, share what are some challenges you have faced around measurement. I'd love to just hear from everyone. Unwillingness to change things that are not working. Yes, definitely felt that one acutely. And I mean, it could be as simple as, I don't know where to start. That is totally valid too. Limited responses, surveys maybe not being sufficient to measure what we really need to know. Anyone else have something, a challenge that they want to share? Yeah, change takes time for sure. Not asking the right questions, data quality issues. Yeah, these are all really important issues, because if you're the one kind of advocating for data, any one of these challenges just gives people fuel for, oh, hey, well, I guess we shouldn't do that because that's going to take too long, or we don't have the right information, we can't do that, and so I think these are all things we can work through, and that we'll talk about a little bit. Listening to what the data tells us, getting more data, deeper data. Yeah, these are all great points. Thank you. Okay, Tom. So I really believe that creating a culture of data can help address some of these issues, a lot of these issues actually, because we can turn compliance and requirements into something meaningful and tied into the real work that we're doing. We can strengthen our teams by having everyone on the same page, or a lot closer to the same page, around the use of data. And we can build up ourselves and our colleagues and our stakeholders, sharing data with parents, sharing data with students. Again, not a statistician, don't need to be a statistician. These are things that really anyone can do, and that are not always very difficult to do, but they can really have a lot of benefits. So I want to talk you through two examples, one from when I worked at a school and one from when I worked with the district. So the school was a community school, which for Ohioans would be a community learning center, I believe, like a 21st century school with after-school programs, and I was the resource coordinator. And so, yeah, so the challenge was when I started, the principal said to me, we need to improve our attendance. That's the main thing I want you to focus on. And he showed me a really horrible spreadsheet that would have been impossible to use to track anything with. And so our use of data kind of grew from there, and my business really grew out of this as well. So excitingly, our results after like the third school year, we saw higher attendance rates for over half of the students who had been chronically absent for 2 years. So over half of our chronically absent population had increased their attendance rates, and sometimes by, over 4%, which was significant. Oh, thank you for the wow. I appreciate it. So how did we do it? We were very rigorous around tracking data. Now, I will be honest, I was the one spearheading this data movement, but by building this culture on our team of using data, we were really able to make a lot of difference. So we tracked data daily. We tracked interactions with families daily. We had a shared spreadsheet database that we all could enter into, we all could see. We talked about it at meetings. And this was not natural for most of my team members, I should be very clear. This was very different and new for them. And some of them, it took time. Our secretary, who I loved, it took her probably into the 3rd year before she actually downloaded Dropbox to view said spreadsheet on her own and input information. But, she warmed to it over time. We had regular meetings with our attendance team. We would go through our heavy hitters and who really needed some intervention, talk about who knew, oh yeah, so-and-so is having surgery, or so-and-so's mother, or not mother, I guess, hopefully, someone passed away, like things that would cause large attendance gaps. We would talk about it. So like I mentioned with the secretary at our school, I just trained people who needed it. But eventually it kind of became the culture among our attendance team, and even with our teachers. We share data not only with teachers and administrators, but also with families. So if we had meetings about, really challenging attendance issues, I would pull up, a graph of their child's attendance, or sometimes even show them, here's the school average, and like, here's where your child is. And it was never from a critical point of view. It was always from, we're really concerned and we want to help. So on the flip side, this is a district example from when I worked in the Office of Engagement at Baltimore City Schools. So I know it's different in a lot of different places, but in Baltimore at the time, which was a few years ago when I started, the Title I Parent and Family Engagement Funds were, every Title I school was given its own allocation and was responsible for spending its own funds, which may seem great if you don't have that flexibility, but because there are some restrictions on the funds, it was going unspent in huge quantities because people didn't know what to do, and it was a small enough allocation that they just gave up. So through building a culture of data in our office that managed these funds, in FY16, the average percent spent was around, or actually not average, but total percent spent was around 53%. So a ton of money was either getting repurposed or going back to the state, which is unacceptable. And in 1 year, we got it to almost 80%. So yeah, how we did it, it was very similar in a lot of ways to the school-based example, because I was working with a lot of colleagues who maybe didn't understand data, were intimidated by data. And so we did trainings. I put together some processes. At this point, I was the evaluator. And so I was able to put in place a data dashboard, which, I taught myself how to do it. It is actually not as complicated as it seems. We developed goals. Honestly, I took a piece of chart paper and drew a thermometer and would color it in red when we had reached some other goals. It does not have to be high tech, but we kept everyone on the same page, in the loop, updated regularly, and showed them that checking their data was a positive thing. Because I think previously they had been getting the, oh God, this is criticizing my work. This is showing that I'm not doing a good enough job. And we just kind of moved past that a little bit. So we were able to be positive about using data and celebrate our growth. And then in terms of the compliance piece, we showed our schools and our staff members well, for staff members and schools, I guess, we worked on connecting spending requirements. So this isn't just compliance. This isn't just you have to spend this money. This is a really annoying requirement into, hey, you already have a family engagement plan. You already have an attendance engagement plan. You already have all these things in place. This is just the means to do it. So let's figure out a way to support the work you're already doing with this seemingly very annoying requirement and, merge all these things together into something meaningful. I think I probably covered those, so thank you. So I just wanted to talk through, I have a couple minutes left. I just wanted to talk through some tips for creating this culture of data within your organization. Be a leader. If you're someone who appreciates data or want to learn about data, model that behavior. I mean, it's just like we do with our students. Sometimes people just need to see that it's possible and that it works and that people can do it easily and not be stressed about it. And also, numbers are really hard to argue with. So if you start using data in your own work, people don't always know what to say when you've presented like a fairly foolproof argument, right, for what's happening. So as part of the modeling, encourage others to think about the data that affects their own work. Use shared systems. Now, I'll be really honest. I used shared systems for everything. We had SharePoint, I think, at the time. And most people on my team did not use it. They would slowly get used to it. But I constantly reminded them, hey, yeah, our spreadsheet's on SharePoint. Hey, you can check it on the data dashboard. Hey, putting all these things in place so that at a certain point, they have no choice but to start adopting those behaviors. And like I said, with my chart paper thermometer, you don't have to use anything high tech either. Maybe it's just a chart on your wall or a weekly handout with data in people's mailboxes. It can be really simple. So like I said before, connect the dots between what feels like compliance and what you know in your heart is your real work, because often they can complement each other. A lot of this is just changing habits. So I know that people mention that this takes time, but the more you can build in data into your regular meetings or host once a month data meetings, reflect on how you message to people and see how much more progress you can make by shifting your mindset and shifting your messaging to really support the real work and not in service of these compliance requirements. And then collaborate with other teams. If you're building out a data dashboard, share it with others or vice versa, so that there isn't a duplication of data collection and there isn't a duplication of efforts to try and understand data. And then people have different kinds of data. So the more we can collaborate across district offices or school teams, right? Like there's the instructional leadership team and the attendance team and the engagement team. The more we can collaborate and share data, the easier it is to continually talk about it and use it without as much confusion. So that's it for me. I really appreciate you listening. I'll definitely respond to the questions I saw in the chat. Shameless plug, I just relaunched my website, so definitely feel free to check that out. I'd love to have you visit and keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Klein. We really appreciate your presentation. And I love that some of the stories you were able to tell really seemed to excite some people in the chat box. So I also love when we talk about family engagement and the data you collect around it and reviewing it in the same way we talk about things like academic data. We talk about things like attendance data. Family engagement is a strategy to improve a lot of student and school and family outcomes. So we should always be having plans in place and analyzing this data at the team level as you would any other sort of data. And I love that your stories really kind of drew that out. Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to keep moving right along here into kind of the next phase, which kind of gets from kind of the planning stage and the team building stage. Also love that component, talking about this culture of data idea, to act to what it looks like in implementation in a pretty large district here. And I'd like to welcome Tracy Hill of Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And this is just an exciting day for me, because as Dr. Boone was really a mentor to getting my head straight around family engagement work. Tracy really helped me bring it to the next level as someone who's really out there doing this work in a school district. So I will turn it over to her to talk to you about what Cleveland's doing. Thank you, Tracy.
And thank you, Tom, and everybody else who's on the webinar today. It's really a pleasure to be here and share with you our journey in Cleveland. Next slide. Yeah. So what I'm going to talk about today is just one of the ways that we use data for meaningful family engagement. And as many of you know, Cleveland is one of the poorest cities in our nation. We have a very high rate of childhood poverty. But we've been able to, in the last 10 years under the Cleveland plan, make some significant gains in our graduation rate, which is about 78.2 right now, which has been a 26% increase over the last 9 years. And also our third grade literacy rates, our attendance rates have dropped significantly or increased significantly, and we've seen a drop in chronic absenteeism. And while we can't say that family engagement is the cause of all those things, we know that there is a correlation between meaningful and authentic engagement to improving outcomes for students. Next slide, Tom. So the opportunity that I want to talk about is that, and I think all of you believe this as well, is that every parent, every caregiver, our families want the best for their children. I have yet to meet a parent out of the 26,000 or so in our district that does not want positive outcomes for their children. And it's our job as educators and school districts to really think about how we can collaborate and partner with our families and look at their strengths instead of their deficits. So we really have a strength-based approach. Parents do have the capacity to support their children regardless of their immigration status, SEL status, or educational level, because again, parents do want the best for their children. And despite some popular beliefs that families who are in poverty don't value education, what we've seen here is that the more we do to authentically engage our families and create partnerships, the more welcome they feel and more respected they feel, and the more willing they are to come into our schools and participate in the partnerships that are established. And that parents are their child's first teachers and experts on their children. We always want to acknowledge that parents have these funds of knowledge about how their children learn best, what motivates them, what are some of their struggles, and tell us and help us. They share their stories, so we have a better understanding of what types of outreach we can provide and supports that we can put in place. Next slide. Dr. Karen Mapp has done a lot of work talking about family engagement, and I think many of you are aware of the dual capacity framework. There was a version 2 of it that came out this year, and I did not put that into the slide deck. But I think when we talk about meaningful engagement, one of the things that we do in our district is a lot of surveys. You know, we actually have tools and resources available to our schools, which are on an Insight webpage, as well as OneDrive folders, and we use Microsoft Teams, where we build these toolkits of templates and surveys and vendors and workshop providers. And we always want to encourage our schools to actually survey parents and families to find out, what is it? How can we better engage you? What types of workshops or activities do you want to come to? What's the best way to communicate with you? But we really have to think about the elements of effective engagement once we do find out from parents and families what their interests are, and make sure that we are relational, that we are building those relationships, because we can put into place all the best programs in the universe and activities. But if we haven't established relationships with our families and built trust with them, then they're not going to come. That they're collaborative, that many of our families are actually involved in our schools on the family engagement committees. As part of our district level family engagement policy, our schools are mandated to have a family engagement committee. And very similar to the NNPS model, these committees are responsible for developing programs, activities, and strategies in their schools to engage families. So that collaborative practice is very important when we think about this work. That there is that link to learning. I often say we got to move away from I don't want to say necessarily the bake sales and things like that, because those things are important to build a school culture and to get families into the door. The father-daughter dances, the muffins for moms and the donuts for dads. Yes, we want to bring our families in and have those types of activities to, again, get them through the door. But we have to move it to another level when we think about activities that are linked to learning, and that our families are engaged in activities which educators plan that really look at what students are learning, look at the instructional core, instructional practices and strategies, and helping our families learn what assessments are being given, and that our engagement activities are linked to learning and data driven, that they're interactive. A lot of times when we bring in families for activities, it's a sit and get. And we forget that our parents are actually adults, and there are principles of adult learning in terms of making them interactive, providing opportunities for feedback and small group activities, and then that they're relevant. We've done a lot of activities around the college going process in our district. We were recently, about a year ago, named a Say Yes City, where we now have family support specialists in our buildings, and we'll have a family support specialist in all of our 105 buildings by the end of 2014. But we talk about this college going culture. One of the things that many of our schools in our district has become acclaimed for is actually having family college tours. So that, when we think about what's relevant to families, a lot of our families do want to provide that opportunity for their students to go to college, but sometimes it's something that they themselves don't know how to do. So we really want to make our practices relevant to our families as well as our scholars. Next slide, please. So in our district, we have what we call our academic achievement plans. And when we talk about the work of compliance, we know that all of our schools in Cleveland qualify for Title I. So each one of them gets an allocation for family engagement, and there are those compliance pieces. What we developed several years ago was actually looking at our academic achievement plan and thinking about how do we connect all the dots? Well, one of the ways that you connect all the dots between attendance and SEL and family engagement and student achievement and working with ELL families and special ed families is through this academic achievement plan, which is like the CCIP, the Continuous Improvement Plan. Within our academic achievement plans, we actually do integrate all of those different aspects. We really do make an effort to connect all the dots. So for all the schools are required to do this academic achievement plan annually. And within the academic achievement plan, they have to look at their data for social emotional learning. They have to look at their data for attendance, parent engagement. We have to look at our subgroups in terms of ELL students, students who are receiving intervention, special ed, and the schools have to develop academic priorities. Here you just see an example of an academic priority for math proficiency, and this talks about what the teachers will do in terms of instructional practice in the classroom, and then how they're going to measure it, what type of evidence they're going to present, how they're going to collect data. And then what we did was we actually, for every priority, connected it to a family engagement strategy. So Tom, if you can go to the next page. Next slide, Tom. What we have to do in our academic achievement plans is that schools have to really think about, okay, we have this strategy where we are going to be looking specifically at math and raising our achievement in math. But how are we going to partner with our families to do that? What type of evidence-based practices will we be using to engage with our parents around math and increasing math proficiency? So within all of our academic achievement plans from K to 12, our elementary schools as well as our high schools, for every priority that they identify, they have to create a family engagement strategy. And for the math example that was just seen in the prior slide, this is what they decided to do to engage their parents of their K-3 families, which was a subgroup that they were having achievement problems with. We, in our district, adopted the academic parent teacher team model, and we still have it in several of our schools, where this is a model where teachers actually look at their data, identify foundational skills that the students are lacking in, and then they present a workshop for parents where they review the data, they show their students where they are at, where they should be, and then they provide an activity. They actually do a gradual release strategy with the families where they demonstrate an activity that that they can do at home with their students, and then they do it with the parents, and then the parents practice with each other. So this is how we embed family engagement into our improvement plans for our schools. And it's been a very effective strategy, and our schools really are very thoughtful about this. What we do also is every quarter our schools come together and they have to review their academic achievement plans and review their data. And we have a consultancy where the principals and members of their academic teams and sometimes parents will look and say, okay, well, this isn't working in terms of our parents aren't showing up for this. So what else can we do to get those parents in the door? So in addition to having these plans, they don't just sit on a shelf somewhere and collect dust. They are reviewed quarterly, and then adjustments are made in terms of instructional strategies as well as family engagement strategies. Next slide. The other thing is, again, because all of our schools receive Title I funds for family engagement, we know that there are some compliance with that. So what we've done in Cleveland is really be thoughtful about, as we're planning for our school-based family engagement, helping them to understand how to make that connection. Again, referring back to their academic achievement plans to drive what that Title I family engagement is going to look like. So this is just a template that we developed for school teams to use to actually get them to be thoughtful about what they're doing when they are engaging families. They have to actually complete this Title I action plan and submit it in our procurement system so that they can utilize those funds. And that way, when we do go through an audit process, we actually have all of the documentation for how those expenditures are made in our procurement system. So you can see that there's a place for all the team members, again, referring back to that academic achievement plan. What are the priorities that they're addressing? The identified area of the activity, whether it's in the instructional core, career college readiness, attendance, social emotional learning, or building family capacity. Again, connecting all those dots together. We do use a tiered approach when we're talking about family engagement in our district, because one of the things that we want to get them to do is move away from, the universal strategies of we're going to have a literacy night and invite all the families from pre-K to 8 to come in, to really thinking about doing more targeted activities. So when we think about the third grade guarantee, instead of perhaps having a whole school literacy night, to do maybe one that's focused on the third grade guarantee and bringing in K-3 families, again, to demonstrate to them strategies that they can use at home to support literacy development, reviewing data with the parents. And then we also use intensive interventions, and we might do this for students who are chronically absent. But this is our way of making sure that when our school teams are planning, that they're being thoughtful about linking their family engagement back to their academic achievement plans, and also thinking about those elements of it being relational and relevant and linked to learning and collaborative. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we also do in our district, this is just some examples of programs and activities that I've pulled off of some of our Title I action plans, like a monthly third grade guarantee meeting with parents of students who are on REMPs. Again, if we want those students to move, we really need to be thinking about the interventions that are in place for those students and sharing data with the families, as well as strategies for what they can do at home. Class meetings, I've seen this with many of our middle school teachers, where they are having class meetings and sharing data with parents and caregivers, and thinking about activities that parents can do to support skill development. In our high schools, what we see a lot of is with the changing graduation requirements, that schools are having cohort meetings for their high school parents. So that, we're thinking about freshman parents need different information than senior parents. Sophomore parents need different things than freshman parents. And these meetings are used to discuss their progress towards graduation. Again, because we are a Say Yes city, all of our students are eligible for scholarships if they attend high school from 9th to 12th grade in Cleveland. So we really have a strong push for all of our seniors to complete college applications and FAFSA and getting their FAFSAs completing, even if they're not planning on going to college, but to just have them go through that process as a plan B. Grade band, math, and literacy meetings and nights, again, thinking about how are schools looking at their data from their assessments and targeting specific grade bands and skills when they're having these meetings so that they are more meaningful for parents. And then again, thinking about SEL strategies, social emotional learning, working with parents on anti-bullying workshops and other strategies for supporting SEL. Again, what we do again, and I'm going to talk, I see a lot of questions about parent-teacher conferences, and I'll get to that in a second, as well as data regarding timing. And we do survey our parents about times that are best for them. And we offer conferences during the day and the evening. But what we do is we've developed a data dashboard that I'm going to share with you next. This is actually the form, and I couldn't get a good snapshot of it. But basically what we do is once we get the data and attendance sheets and agendas and the evaluations, I ask that whenever we have a program that there is an evaluation at the end of that program, so we can find out from our parents if they found it beneficial, but also to get their ideas about other things that we might be able to do to engage them. My staff, I have the Family Engagement Office. We are blessed to actually have a department for family and community engagement in Cleveland. I have 2 managers, a director, and then we have 5 FACE coordinators who work with those family engagement teams. They are responsible for collecting all of the evaluations and Title I action plans and agendas and sign-in sheets, and then entering that data into, we've created a dashboard in SharePoint. And what they do is they enter that data, and these are the things that are on that form. So we look at what network the school is in, we look at what school, we look at the program or activity name. We're collecting data about grade bands, the tiers, is it a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 family engagement strategy? What is the focus? Is it literacy? Is it career and college readiness? Is it SEL? Is it math? And then the date, and then the number of attendees as well. And then if Tom, you'll go to the next slide. We have this family engagement dashboard. In our district, we use a lot of data to drive decisions about instruction, about our attendance campaign, which is won national recognition for reducing chronic absenteeism. So all these dashboards sit in what we call our dashboard center. This is one of our 2 family engagement dashboards. We have one for parent-teacher conferences, where we're monitoring our parent-teacher conference rates. All of our teachers enter their parent-teacher conference into our student information system, so it is quantifiable. We are able to actually track what parents are attending conferences and which ones are not, so we can provide additional outreach. And for the last 5 years, actually, our district has achieved a parent-teacher conference rate of 90% or better. Which I think in a large urban district speaks volumes about the work that we're doing here to really reach out to our parents and partner with them. But this particular family engagement dashboard is from that form, and this is data that we collect to look at the focus areas. We want to see what our schools are focusing on in terms of their family engagement. We also are able to look at this dashboard by school and see when parents are attending. So you'll see in the lower right-hand corner the days of the week and the average attendance. And this helps our schools to actually look at what are the best days, what are the best times. We're also tracking in our district. Our goal is to decrease our tier 1 universal strategies and really ramp up our tier 2 and tier 3 strategies. So again, we are using data to drive the type of engagement that we're doing with our families and make sure that we're for those families and students who are getting intervention, really being thoughtful about how are we engaging those families to move those students. Again, this is a dashboard that we developed just again to help us look at the focus areas, and we can also use this data to make sure that our schools are doing what they said in their academic achievement plans to engage their families around their priorities. Next slide, Tom. So, we know there, and I could go on, I have a lot of things that I would like to say, but again, just demonstrating how we collect data and use it to inform our practice at the district level. We know that there are challenges to engagement. While we have made a lot of gains in Cleveland, we still have a long way to go. We have turnover in terms of teachers and principals, so sometimes it feels like I'm starting over every year, but I'm very motivated to continue to do this work. The challenges are, again, that teachers have few opportunities to learn about and experience with strategies and tools for engagement. So in our district, we do provide professional development to our principals as well as our teachers in best practices for engagement. Again, engagement conditions, a lot of our districts are really looking at raising achievement, and some don't align their values and beliefs around family engagement to support student achievement. So I just want to encourage everyone out there who's doing this work to keep it moving, make your voice heard, share the research, share best practices so that it does become embedded and integrated like it is in Cleveland. And it is challenging work, but the rewards, again, are great. We've seen improvements in our graduation rates and our literacy rates, our attendance rates, because of how we've integrated family engagement into all of that work and really having a holistic approach to educating our scholars here in Cleveland. And I'd like to thank you for your time and am open to any questions.
Yes, thank you, Tracy, and thanks for sharing Cleveland's story and journey with us. We are running slightly behind, but I do not want to take away from the questions of our colleagues. So if you at this point have any questions that either weren't caught throughout the presentation that you dropped in the chat box, or if you want to turn your mics on and share a question, I will pause about 15 to 30 seconds to see what comes through. Yeah, so Tracy, I think one question did pop through, and I think that this might be towards you, and I think Amanda, maybe if you'd like to chime in as well. We had a participant ask, how do you build, what is your strategy around building relationships with families if principal and staff changes are high? I think also, especially in a district as big as yours, Tracy, I'm also thinking, what if you have a principal that maybe just isn't making it a priority with their staff and building as well. I think that might be an issue that comes up often as well.
Yeah. So am I unmuted?
Mhm.
Okay, so one of the things, again, we do principal training at the beginning of the school year. One of the things that we built into our schedule, our calendar, and this was a direct result of our parent advisory committee, our district level committee, was our parents said, we want to meet our teachers and principal before school starts like they do in the suburbs. So our schools are required to have a meet and greet before school starts. Our principal and teacher evaluations have family engagement embedded in them, so there is that requirement. And then we have our network leaders, or our school is divided into 6 networks who do receive a quarterly report. We have a family engagement rubric where we actually rate the schools based on their engagement activities, of whether they're accomplished, skilled, developing, or needs improvement. And having that rubric and having that quarterly report of the activities that you saw reflected in our engagement data dashboard really strongly encourage principals, even though they might be new, to really think about family engagement as a strategy for school improvement. Our FACE coordinators are in the schools supporting those family engagement committees. And as I said, I don't want to say everything's perfect. We when you think about the bell curve, we have some of our schools that are doing really exceptional work in terms of family engagement. Then we have a bunch in the middle that are, doing okay and really have some good practices. And then we have those on the low end where we have actually developed a tiered support system for our schools, where when we see that we have a school that's struggling, or they're just not getting it, we actually have a tiered support where we visit that school more often. We have a conversation with the network superintendent who supervises that principal to try to get things moving and try to get people on the same page. But we try to provide as many supports as possible so that we make it easier for people to do the work. If you're asking people to do family engagement and you're not providing PD and capacity building and support, then you're asking them, you're setting them up for failure.
I would just add that, except for the fact that this is a data-based workshop, this is perhaps an anecdotal suggestion, but just from my experiences working in schools and being part of community, schools that are really part of communities, I've found that with the exception of maybe a zero-based situation, which is rare, there are always people who have worked there or volunteered there for, years and decades. And they often are the ones, I think, who hold the key to really knowing the nuances of that community and families, and they've probably taught the parents of the children, or and so I think that when there is turnover, those are the people who are great to leverage. And I think that is the benefit of kind of building this culture of data and of engagement, because then people don't feel like they are outsiders in this work. They feel like their contributions and knowledge of the community are valued, because they're always there. In every school I've worked in, there's always been at least 1 or 2 people like that.
Thank you all for sharing your perspective, and thank you all out there, those fellows out there, for your questions. Continue to follow the conversation and ask questions on our message board. If you don't remember, it's up here at go.osu.edu/fellow discussion. I will have that link and some prompts out to you in the follow-up email here, reminding you about our message board and some of the great stuff up there. I wanted to let you know just to have on your calendars, but also I will be sending out a calendar invite with some of the follow-up materials that we're looking towards our next virtual meeting to be around March 10th. If this absolutely does not work for large groups of people, of course, we're flexible, here to meet your needs. But Tuesdays seem to be doing okay for some people. I know it's getting later in the school year now, and we might have some people running around, but that's what we're looking at for the next virtual meeting here and we have some ideas about what that content will be. Look out for that. That will be based on some of your survey responses. So thanks for your guys' participation. Another thing here, and I'm going to ask Dr. Boone to jump in here just for a second, give you some updates around this. We want to let you know to be looking out for a invitation and a save the date for an event that we're hosting here with some of our national partners called Reframing the Conversation. And it's going to be a day really focused around practitioners and some of the people we work with in the day-to-day to be reframing the conversation around family engagement.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I hope that you will be able to take this day, and hopefully I'm going to encourage you to do your best to make the time to come on this Friday, March 20th. We are inviting our friends from the National Association for Family School Community Engagement and a group that they've worked with to conduct research over the last 3 years around public perception of family and community engagement, and some of those communication blocks and ways of thinking that get in the way of us really making improvements and really being understood. We see so much expertise here. All of our participants here are bringing experience and expertise, and yet sometimes we feel like you can feel like you're banging your head against the wall. And I think part of that is really, it's not just what we know, but it's also being understood. And that's really what this day is going to be about. It's going to be about hearing about that research. It's going to be hearing about how to be more impactful in our communication to policymakers, to parents, to school personnel, to our community members, to our school leaders. And it'll be a time we're going to roll up our sleeves. You can bring some of your documents with you and actually sort of practice using this reframing language in your own work. So we are really excited about this day. We hope you'll make time to be there, and we will be sending you, like Tom said, you'll get an email invite from us this week. So thanks, Tom, for the chance to.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this is a big event. We wanted to make sure that our fellows were invited and at the table as leaders throughout the state in the work. I know we're a minute or two behind, so I do want to just say goodbye. If you can, before you jump off here, please take the survey, the exit ticket, if you will. This exit ticket really helps us make sure that this is useful for you all and make sure us to meet any future needs that you have. That is at go.osu.edu/fellow survey. Last time we had 19 respondents, so let's try to get a couple more than that. That'll be our goal for this time. And with that, I just want to give again another thanks to our contributors to this meeting for taking some of their time to share with us their experience, as well as all of you for being here today. No, it's always hard to come back if some of you had a holiday yesterday, and that it's always hard to take the time away from your duties. So thank you so much. Go take the survey, look out for some follow-up information, and I'll be on the line for the next couple minutes or so if you need anything. Thanks again, everybody.